Do you ever get jealous of those people who don't get nervous at all? Because I know I did.
I want that because I know that I'm ready to go. I felt too comfortable in one fight. Mm-hmm. So then when I'm running to the octagon, I'm like, oh, Bob. I'm like, Bob, my legs don't feel good. I'm like, they're really shaky. I'm like, I must have ran too much this week. I'm like, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. And he's like, dude, just go fight. He's like, just go fight. He's like, that's what you do. I was like, all right.
That's easy, Bob. You're not the one getting punched in the head by a monster. Our next guest, you could argue the best fighter ever. Certainly right now, walking the planet heavyweight division. You know him. You love him. He has a fight coming up here. UFC 241, I think August 17th, UFC. He's a current heavyweight champion of the world. Friend of the show. You can follow him on the Twitter also at DC_MMA. Needs a better handle than that. Daniel Cormier, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How about you? But the fighting style's okay. I don't know how effective it is, but you do have it down, though. You look just like the Notre Dame hat, the logo.
Do you know where this stems from, though? Actually, I was reading up back in bare knuckle boxing. I don't know if you know this. Probably we were just talking about hand injuries before the show because they didn't want to. They would break their hands, right? Yeah. They had no gloves, so something like 80 to 90% of the shots were body shots. So apparently, they were more concerned with protecting their ribs and their body, and they would just go for it. But it still doesn't. That still doesn't explain the wrist turned this way.
The wrist turned back. I don't get it. Yeah, well, you know what? Honestly, when you're punching. Like Bob always tells me that, right? When I first started, I like to get close and I like to punch to the body. Well, we have a bad habit of like wrapping the punches around the side. Right. But Cook always said, when you're punching, you punch and you bring the fist up to make it dig more than just kind of slap. So maybe that's what it is. So maybe that's why the fists are like that, because you dig up with it.
Maybe, but this is definitely going to become a gift. Daniel Cormier doing this right now. That's sorry, your children will never live that down. Dad, is this you? It's just the people on the internet are absolutely terrible people.
They're horrible. They're savages.
They are savages, which is funny coming from you because some people might look at you as a savage fighter. We've had you on the show a couple of times. Okay, let me ask you this. Whenever we've had some people who are greatest in their field on this show, and I'm fortunate enough to get to sit down and ask them some questions. We had Brian Shaw, world's strongest man, like 8 times on the show. Let me ask you objectively, what is it that you think makes you so much better than other fighters? Because here's the thing, and I don't want to insult anybody out there, but like Josh Barnett, for people who aren't interested in MMA, this is still something you probably want to know if you want to be the best engineer, if you want to be the best singer. There's a gap with people at the top. Josh Barnett, when you fought him, Dan Henderson, these are mean guys. Dan Henderson, I believe qualified for the Olympics. Josh Barnett, I watched him beat people senseless. And great fighters is not an insult to them. I watched you throw them around like they had never fought before. Why do you think there's that gap?
I think certain matchups benefit your style, right? And because those guys their base styles are wrestling, right? And I wrestle too. I feel like the reason the gap was so big between Dan and I was because I had wrestled more recently, right? He was done in 1996. I wrestled until 2008. Yeah. So I think I was just a little more like, my wrestling was probably a little more sharp as opposed to his.
But even still, overall, I mean, as a champion, you've taken out guys who are unbelievable. I mean, we can use Miocic. We could use people like Anthony Johnson, where people were scared for that fight because both you had so much power. Consistently, what's the difference?
It's just my approach. My approach is I train really, really hard. I try not to leave any stone unturned. I mean, I'm still about 12, 13 weeks from the fight, and I just moved those spin bikes, right?
Yeah, the Airdyne,
Peloton and the Echelon bike. I got Peloton's like the massive one. I have like an Echelon bike, was like the one that's a little bit less expensive, but I just put it in my living room.
I have an old Schwinn from Craigslist, so I'm not judging.
Hey, exactly. It's like, I'm trying to keep my money, but instead I can start getting in shape. Even though I'm 13 weeks from the fight, I'm starting to get in shape, and just to try to, when 8 weeks hit, I'm like I'm ahead of the curve. So I won't be playing catch up. So for 5 weeks, I'll just start preparing myself to prepare for the fight. And I think that shows whenever I get in the octagon.
But I guess, people like me, the layman, we look at it, when we assume that everyone at that top level, right? When you're the heavyweight champion, we assume that the number 2, the number 3 guys, at that point, that they all have good work ethics, that they all have good trainers. And then, I mean, sometimes you have really competitive, obviously, title fights that people can look back on or were controversial. Not with your recent fights, and certainly not at heavyweight. I just wonder if there's something that you think really separates. Do you think it's work ethic?
I think it's work ethic, and I just think heavyweights are a little bit slower. They're not as fast as the 205-pound guys. When I went to 205, I immediately noticed a difference. Like, wow, these dudes are a lot faster. They're a lot more athletic, and I just I got it right away. But I think it's a number of things. Just my ability to just work, and then just being like such a competitive guy. Like it really is a great thing. But it's also like a curse because I can't turn it off. It's like in everything I do, I'm like ultra competitive. I'm on that stupid bike the other day, and on the bike you can spin. And I don't know how to spin. I don't know how to cycle. I've never ridden. Oh, first off, they gave me like one of those biker seats, the little small seat.
Yeah, the one that goes.
This ass.
Well, that
like,
goes right back to the
seat.
GIF. Yeah.
Yeah, it was right in the middle. It was right in the middle. I was like, this is killing my ass. I go, get me a big boy seat. So now I'm riding the seat that's like on those dudes bicycles, like with the big wide seat. But I'm riding, and as I see my name on the side, like every now and again, if my speed picks up, it'll pop into like a ranking with the other 1,000 people that are on the app doing the class.
Oh, wow.
And then I'm like going faster, right? Because I'm like, shit, I gotta win. And I'm exhausted.
And you're beating some girl at Soul Cycle named Trista.
I'm beating Trista from San Luis Obispo. And then she's like, maybe it's her little girl playing. Her little girl's like on her bike, like her kid's playing on the bike. Yeah. But it says Trista's profile, so I'm like trying to win. It's bad. I can't turn it off.
Does that not bode well for you then? Since you've talked about retirement, at least here somewhere in the next couple of fights. What do you think it's going to be hard to kind of come down from being at that hyper competitive level?
I think that's the problem. That's the problem. I just don't know. I don't know what my life looks like after competition, because the first time I learned to train for something at the highest level, I was 15 years old.
Right.
I went and wrestled in the world championships for 15 and 16-year-olds for the United States. And I was like, and then it's just been that for 25 years. I've never had a time where I wasn't preparing for something. So maybe it'll just be like the television stuff I do and all that. And maybe try to find that competitive, safe space through my children and my wrestling. I don't know. I really don't know what's going to become of Daniel Cormier when there's nothing to chase. Like I've always had something to chase.
Right.
I love to chase.
Does that scare you at all?
A little bit. It's a little scary. Like, because I was talking to my wife yesterday and I was telling her about Les Miles, right? He was coach at LSU, at Oklahoma State prior, then at LSU, and then he got fired from LSU. And then his wife said that he had an apartment in town that he had an office where every day he still went to work because that's what he had to do. He would look at recruiting boards, he would look at this, and it was like he wanted to stay sharp because what if he decided to coach again? And he did. Now he's at the University of Kansas, but he went to work every day. So for me, I was talking to Selena the other day. I was like, do I get an office in town to handle all my wrestling and my television stuff? Or do I do something in the house and just secure a room that has just work stuff to where I can focus all this energy on something new? Because I need something. And I'll coach my wrestling. I'll go to AKA and I'll help with the younger fighters. But I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's a little bit scary, but it's life,
Yeah, I think it's almost similar to in a lot of ways, and I'm not at all belittling, obviously, people who are veterans who come back, but people who come back from sort of war. I mean, it's just a super high intensity, and they have a little bit of trouble sometimes reintegrating because they don't know what it's like to not be operating on that level. And I mean, you see it the same way with a lot of performers. I was just talking with Ted Nugent about it. The reason a lot of comedians, I think, turn to drugs and alcohol is because they're performing to 11:30 at night, and that's also a high. That's really a lot of that's scary to do too. And it seems like the people who really make it are people who learn how to deal with that transition.
Well, I was reading the story on Dwayne Wade the other day, and he said something about he has to see a psychiatrist because he's done now. Because for, I don't know how long he played in the NBA, 18 years, it was always like a schedule. And now it's like there is no schedule. You got to go to the grocery store and do like normal people things. And it's not that easy. But for me, I do a lot of that stuff in my day-to-day life, right? I love going to the grocery store. It's like my favorite thing. And I live in a small town, so it's fine. People don't really mess with me all that much. They see me so much. Like, hey, champ. I'm like, hey, what's going on? But I just need, like, in terms of my competitive drive is where I'm going to need something to really Because otherwise, my wife's like, go to the gym, dude. Like, you're driving me crazy when you're around here too much. Like, all this energy and you don't know what to do with it. So
maybe you should just take up competitive couponing, combine your love for groceries.
Couponing, or you know what I was thinking? I'm like, hey, you can golf for a long time. I got a bad back, so I don't know if the back will allow me to get a good golf swing, but maybe I'll start taking some get a private golf coach or something and just play golf.
Well, see, that's your competitive spirit again. You can't just go play golf for fun. You're like, I'm going to get a private golf coach, and then I'm going to shark guys on the golf course and tell them it's my first game, but not mention your private lessons.
Kicking some ass.
Yeah, sandbagging golf.
Old dudes, though, like old dudes. I'll just start with all the oldest dudes. Oh, yeah, he's what? How old is this guy? Like 60? Okay, my first game is against him. You want to play a who can drive further contest?
You get to join a pro.
You're old, I'm old,
I would pay to see that a Pro-Am tour and you with a cigar in your mouth next to Alice Cooper. He's the best celebrity golfer in the world, Alice Cooper.
He is?
Oh, it's not even close. Yeah, he got sober. It's not even close. He has a great book, a biography called Golf Monster, and it's just one chapter autobiography, next chapter golf tips. And he got sober. Nice. Yeah, he got sober playing 2 18-hole rounds of golf every day. Wow. Every day.
He played 36 holes a day?
Every day. Every day.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
When I was trying to do 9 holes a day, I was like, oh, I'd get so bored. I'm like, it's over. Because I was so bad. I was like, it's over.
Yeah, I know. The one time I did it and it went so long, I was like, man, people who play this all the time must really hate their wife. Because they
don't want to be home.
They're gone all day. Yeah. Like, I feel like they're going home to an abusive wife who's just throwing shoes at them. You know, like, I'm going to go golfing, sweetheart. So that's always interesting to me where this gap is. Well, let me ask you this on the flip side, because obviously you're heavyweight champion of the world. Have you ever been on the other side of it, particularly like you said, when you were 15 starting out in wrestling or anything where you felt like, oh my God, I'm really good, but there's this huge gap between me and this next guy. And what does that feel like?
No, I mean, I think I've had that more than anyone in the world, honestly. Like, and it's not like the huge gap, but I've had to compete against like the greats, right? Like when I was in college, it was Cael Sanderson, who was 100 this dude's the only undefeated college wrestler of all time.
Ankle pick from hell.
Wins, 0 losses. He's just fantastic. Olympic champ, and he beat me. I think I lost like 11 times in college, and he beat me 8 of them. Right? So I wouldn't lose to anybody else but him. And then
did he ever hit an ankle pick on you?
Every single match. Every match he hit me with it. You know Cael?
Oh, well, I follow. It's funny. What I would do when I would start grappling, because there were no schools near me, I would just watch. I'd go, okay, who's the best at this? Let me watch him. Yeah. And I watched his tutorial on the ankle pick, and it's one of those things that maybe this sometimes creates the gap. You realize afterward, because he kind of kept it a secret, it was all the setup where he would be holding. If it was, for example, your right hand, he'd be holding. He'd do kind of not really a snap down, but the gap from your right wrist to your ankle might have been 4 inches at that point. And that's what he would do.
So he would drop and grab it, and I would try to kick away, and then he would just run down and grab my far ankle. So then all of a sudden, I'm like sitting on the ground, and I'm like, shit, he got me again with it. But it was him. And then before the Olympics, in the semifinals of the Olympics, I wrestled this Russian kid named Gatsalov, who was a 5 or 6 time world champ, 2-time Olympic champ, right? Mm-hmm. And he beat me. And then when I got to fighting, it was John Jones. So it was always like I always had the people that people consider maybe the greatest. Mm-hmm. But for me, that's what allowed me to chase things at such a high level because, like I said, I love the chase. Like, I don't run away from it. It's what kind of drives me to be who I am.
Right. What would you say if you had to pick your greatest obstacle that you've had to, like, if you had to pick one to overcome, I mean, either personally or professionally?
Who's been the toughest one of all the best ones?
Or anything that you struggled with that you would say, you really had to plow through to become, the champion that you are?
I think it was the Sanderson thing because it was so early in my life, right? Like, as a 20-year-old kid, it's easy to go, I didn't accomplish my goal it was all I wanted to do was be NCAA champ, and I didn't. But then to be able to dust myself off and then 2 years later be on the world team, right? Like, to understand those lessons as a 21-year-old kid and then apply them to where I'm second in the country in 01, but by 03, I'm top 5 in the world, right? It was like I took those lessons and I applied them to how do I get better? And maybe I don't have to climb this mountain, but there are other ones that I need to try and climb. And it was all lessons I learned from going with Sanderson so many times.
What lessons would you say you learned most from Cael Sanderson? Did you go back in your mind and say, man, I made these mistakes? Or did you go back and say, I didn't make mistakes, he was just better?
He was better. I can easily say that about him. I can say about Gonzalov, the Iranian. Those guys were better. You know, I didn't make mistakes to get beat. There was one time, my senior year, me and Cael are in the finals. I take him down to make the score like 5-4 with like a minute and a half left. And I go to let him go because I have to take him down again. And for a second, I pause. And right as I pause, he just turned around and grabbed my legs. And then I fell. Now it's 7-4. Oh. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. And you could see me on the edge of the mat just like shaking my head like, oh no, I can't believe it. But it was just that moment was probably the most difficult one I had to deal with. It was my last match.
So would you say it's harder to deal with mistakes that you could have avoided, or would you say it's harder to deal with a problem where you just have to accept that someone might be better, it's out of your control?
I think if you make mistakes, it's like, gosh, why didn't I just stay the course? Right? Even when me and Jones fought the last time, we were fighting. The first fight we fought through 3 competitive rounds. The 4th and 5th round, I was exhausted. I didn't fight well. He won. Second fight, we're going through 2 rounds. It's 1 round apiece. First round was very close. Second round, I won. Third round, we're kind of going good again. But then I'm like talking, right? I'm like not in 100% focus. Then I get kicked in the head. But then, right. And so I have to deal with that. Like that, those are the ones that you don't live down very easily. Like,
right.
I'm just like, man, if I would have just stayed laser focused, I don't know what could have happened.
Right.
But it's like, I'm in there like, I'm like, okay, this is going better than I could have imagined. And I start getting too loose, and that's not me. I'm not a guy that talks trash in the fight. Right. I get the job done, and in that moment I didn't, and I ended up paying the ultimate price for it.
You're not like a Diaz brother where you're what bitch?
Yeah, Diaz does stuff like that, right? And I don't do that. But then he was trying to hit me, and I was seeing it moving, and I'm like, what was that? I'm like, no, like that won't happen. And then he went to a position that in the first fight he did a lot of, and then I defended it because we got prepared for it. I'm like, no, not this time.
Right.
But I should have never did that. I should have just stayed laser focused as I always do.
Right.
Through good and through bad. And then I would have did much better. You know, so those are the ones that stay with you at night.
Also, you should have done some Anavar and Deanna ball to even the playing field there. You should have just
even the playing field.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I would imagine the same thing with the Russians you wrestled against. You've had your fair share of matches against human pin cushions.
There's a few little differences in the way that we approach the competition, but ultimately I'm in there. It's my job to get the job done, you know.
Let me ask you this, because I think a lot of people watching, it's easy for people to sort of distance themselves from people who are great. And that could be not only fighters, but it could be, you know, business owners, people who are super wealthy, or maybe people who they see as super skilled, intelligent. So they maybe think that you're not afraid, or you don't face the same kind of adversity, and that sort of absolves people of coming up with solutions themselves. So let me ask you this directly. Before a fight, right, you're looking across, like you're going to have a rematch, for example, with Stipe Miocic, who's a killer in his own right. But before any fight, what do you feel? What's going through? Are you scared? Are you nervous? Are you calm? Is it a blur?
Oh, man. It's so nerve-wracking. It's so nerve-wracking. Like, if I've done it a lot, though, like last year where I fought in January, July, and then again in November, I feel the nerves aren't as strong. Mm-hmm. When I fought in 15, I fought 3 times. And then I didn't fight from October all the way to July. I'm going to fight Anderson Silva, who hadn't fought, and he only came on 2 days' notice. And I felt like it was the most nervous I'd ever been in my life.
Really?
Because it wasn't normal anymore. I wasn't on autopilot. But I go back there, and the whole time I'm thinking, and I went to college. You know, I probably could have got a job, and how many times did I go?
Well, you're not homeless. You're a pretty successful. You do have a job.
I get it. I'm like, why did how many times did I go left when I should have went right to end up here where I'm about to fight some dude in 3 hours? Like, This dude wants to take my head off in 3 hours.
Right.
And then, so I'm nervous. I'm like so nervous. And then once I started moving and I started like taking in the environment, I got some breathing exercises, and I lay down and I rest and I listen to music. And once I start getting into the environment, and in the moment, Steve, I hit I hit the curtain, like my music comes and I'm walking with my team, and I'm like, okay, there's no other place I'd rather be. Like, this is the shit. Like, this is just the best.
So
like,
for you, it's that moment when you leave the curtain. So by the time you get in the octagon, you're not nervous anymore?
Oh, not at all. I'm like, whew, let's get started. I'm like, the moment they always say this, they go, I'm in the back and I'm hitting pads and I'm moving and I'm just kind of like doing my thing. And then there's always the guy from the UFC that goes, we're walking in 5 minutes, champ. And then he leaves and he comes back. All right, DC, it's time to go. And then once they do that, I'm like, all right, man, let's go do this thing. You know, like 8 weeks I've been preparing for this. 8 weeks I've been preparing myself to prove that on this night I'm better.
Well,
right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say
great.
that, though, because some people don't feel that way. Like, we just had Ted Nugent on the show recently. We've had George St. Pierre on, and we've had Chael, we've had Pat. We've had a bunch of different people on the show, and some people say, no, I don't get nervous, I love it. And some people get really nervous. Now, I'm like you before. Every time I do a live show, even before I often do this show, I get so nervous. And before particularly big live shows where I've got to do an hour and a half, if my wife is there, she'll tell you, I always have this moment where I go, I've forgotten everything. I don't remember anything. I don't remember my set. And then I usually have to go poop. And then, that's why I always wonder with fighting, like when you're doing stand-up, you're doing a live show, you can go to the bathroom, but you're all wrapped. I've got to imagine that happens a lot in the waiting room.
Every time, right? You go pee, but then here's my deal. I get drug tested every fight, so I hold it. I go in there with a full bladder every time. I piss early. I piss when I get to the arena, and by 3 hours, I'm like, Bob's all, do you need a pee? I'm like, nope. I'm going to hold it till after the fight. I'll piss in that cup. Because otherwise, I'll be there for hours. I'll be there for hours trying to pee. And I'm like, I'd rather wait. I go in there and I fight. And then afterwards, I try to go pee, do my drug test, and get out of there.
It's a trend.
You know, the only time I ever had to take a drug test, did I ever tell you this story, Quarter Black Air?
No.
It was an ad. I swear this is a true story. No, it was a job where I was supposed to call kids as Santa Claus. So parents would, send you the letters to Santa, and I would call them. Oh, Jimmy, have you been a good boy this year? And since I'd done voice acting, I thought this is an easy way to pick up work. I had to drive out 3 counties over to go do a drug test, and I'd gotten the job, and then I peed in a cup, and they pulled it. And I have no idea why to this day. Never done drugs. I have no idea why, but something tells me that I must have peed in that cup, and they said you were unfit to be Santa Claus via
they
phone.
They didn't give you the job?
I had the job, and then they pulled it back, and they wouldn't return my call. So I'm wondering if I pissed hot for something.
Weird.
I've never done drugs. I have no idea what happened.
Hey, I was freaking out today because, I took a USADA test a few weeks ago, and I was like, man, I haven't gotten my result back yet. I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like calling Cassandra. I'm like, hey, what's my USADA password and all this stuff? And she goes, she gives it to me. And then she goes, well, when was the last time? I said, I had one in April. It took 13 days for the result. And she goes, well, when did you get tested this time? I'm like, the 15th. I'm like, isn't it the 31st? She's like, dummy, it's the 28th. It's been 13 days exactly. She's like, you're freaking out for nothing. I was like, yeah, because I want to know, what the hell's going on with my test result? It does not matter if you know you're not doing anything wrong. Getting tested is give me the results so I know that everything's fine.
She just told her you thought it was a leap year and then just hung up the phone.
Adding 3 days.
Yeah, I don't know what.
In advance,
sweetheart, it's not my fault that I'm doing the equation before you do.
Cassandra,
I was just wrong.
Cassandra, I live in the future. I'm 3 days ahead of you. I live in the future.
Now, let me ask
I'm coming back to have this conversation. I'll be back on Thursday. I'll be back on Thursday in a few minutes.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever get jealous of people? We hear legendary stories of people like Chuck Liddell who didn't get nervous. Do you ever get jealous of those people who don't get nervous at all? Because I know I did.
I want that because I know that I'm ready to go. Because it's not, I don't think it's fear. I think it's more competitive nerves. The competition inside of me is stewing. It's more competitive. It's not necessarily, I don't think it's fear. It's a little bit, but it's it's more competitive. And if I feel too at ease, I start talking myself. I felt too comfortable in one fight. Mm-hmm. So then when I'm running to the octagon, I'm like, oh, Bob. I'm like, Bob, my legs don't feel good. I'm like, they're really shaky. I'm like, I must have ran too much this week. I'm like, I don't feel good. And he's like, dude, just go fight. He's like, just go fight. He's like, that's what you do. I was like, all right.
That's easy, Bob. You're not the one getting punched in the head by a monster.
I had one of my best performances ever, but I tried to talk myself out of being as ready as I was because I didn't feel that thing in the pit of my stomach that I normally feel. I've got some really weird superstitions. Seriously.
Okay, what?
I don't, I have a chair in my locker room that nobody can touch because I put everything the way it's supposed to be. From my room, the night before the fight, go my shorts, my fight shorts, my cup, my t-shirt, my hat, my shoes, and my socks. It stays there. It goes from that chair into my backpack, into the arena. Don't touch it. Don't touch your chair.
And if someone touches it, do you start screaming "Waterburn, baby" and hitting your head?
Freaking out. One time, somebody went and touched it. I was like, "Don't touch it." I was like, "Leave it right as it is. It's there for a reason." And they're like, "Dude, calm down." I'm like, "Yo, don't touch the stuff."
Yeah,
and then
maybe
my
we should
hand,
pick that up. It's a good idea.
like my hand. I'm from Louisiana, so my mom always told me, your left hand itches, you're getting money. Right hand starts to itch, you're giving away money. It's like money passing through your hands. That's what she always told me. Weird Louisiana thing. So every time I fight, I'm like just looking at my hand to like start itching because it means I'm gonna win. And every time it doesn't, I win. I promise you. Hey, Steve, every time it itches, I win.
Wow.
It itches all through fight camp. But if it starts doing this, I'm like, oh, I better run more. Because I start freaking myself out.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like it should be necessarily your method of periodizing your training. It sounds to me like it could lead to overtrain. It's like, no, I gotta run 5 more. You already did 18 today. It's not itchy.
Like my right hand telling me to run more so I can win this fight. It's like, go run. It's crazy. It's like I'm from Louisiana. I'm like very superstitious and I know it's so ridiculous.
Especially if you go fight like in Brazil or Mexico, like they have a lot of UFC cards. You know, you could have just picked something up that's skin-born and you don't know.
I've never. I told him I'm never fighting international. I was in Brazil last 2 weeks ago, and Michael Bisping was going to do a movie in South Africa. As he's leaving, they told him he couldn't go to South Africa because they were saying that he's been in Brazil for more than 15 hours, so he had to go get like a yellow fever test or something. Ugh. So this dude was on a freaking 36-hour trip to so many different countries just to try to get to the set of his movie because he went to Brazil. Brazil's a scary place, man. I know. I was there for like 5 days and didn't leave my hotel. Like the beach was like 100 yards away from my room, and I was just staring at it longingly. Like it would be so fun to walk in this place. I'm scared to get robbed. I'm terrified of getting robbed. You know, it's like I'm staring at it. Like, dude, you're the heavyweight champ of the world. I'm like, yeah, but. And then Dominic Cruz is just sitting there on the beach by himself. He's such an angry little guy, Cruz. He's like having lunch by himself. Cruz is like, I wish they would. Cruz is like, I wish somebody would try to rob me. Yeah. He's sitting at a table at the beach by himself eating lunch.
Gosh. Well, see, that's actually a pretty good comparison there because you get some people on the internet going like, oh, people wouldn't do that to me in real life. It's like the heavyweight champion of the world doesn't want to go to the beach in Copacabana because he knows that a knife is still more effective than whatever.
It's still undefeated. Or a gun because they fear-mongered me, right? It's like my wife. Every morning my wife gets fear-mongered by Good Morning America. Good Morning America fear-mongers my wife every morning. She's like, oh, Daniel, did you hear about this? Did you hear about this? I'm like, why do you even watch the news if all they're doing is making you terrified of living life? I'm like, don't watch the news if it's that bad. But they told me in Brazil, don't bring anything nice, right? So the watch I brought, it was a G-Shock watch. It was $50. I brought a G-Shock watch to go on television with because I was so scared.
Dude, and then they said, smart.
They said 2 years ago, the UFC was at that same hotel. They went to the beach and they got robbed. Armed gunmen got all the UFC staff and got them for their cell phones, everything else they may have had.
The whole staff?
Like all the staff, like all the support staff that went to the beach, they said they've got the great. They said it's on the beach. They've got great cold beer, and it's like you want to go hang out. And the beer may cost you. First, the beer's definitely costing you your cell phone, and it just may cost you your life. You can choose: be safe in your room, or go across and have a nice cold beer and run the risk of somebody trying to rob you.
Well, remember, Chael talked a bunch of trash, obviously, when he was fighting Anderson Silva. They had to have him with a full armed security detail. They would chant out that they were going to kill him, and they meant it.
They do it every time, though. Like when you walk to the octagon, it's what they say to their opponents. You're going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to die.
Yeah.
20,000 Brazilians yelling that in Portuguese. That's some intense stuff. I'm not fighting it.
Well, that's a big difference. I wanted to ask you about this in the United States. In Brazil, they always cheer for their guy. Always. In the United States, we're the only country where we'll cheer for the other guy if we think he's a good guy.
It's so crazy. You should have saw when Chris Weidman beat Anderson Silva. I was standing there with like 3 American flags, like just waving them, right? Because Weidman had won, but the crowd was mad. I was like, how come the American guy won? It drove me crazy. It was driving me crazy. My computer's got 1%. It's going to die.
Oh,
so
no.
Hurry.
Oh, no. All right. Well, I had a bunch of other questions I wanted to ask you about life. Okay. So let me go through this pretty quickly. The fight is, let people know when the fight is against Steve.
August 17th, UFC 241, August 17th.
Okay. And what do you plan on doing after that fight? Is this going to be your last one, do you think? Or do you want another crack at Jones at heavyweight? It's been discussed.
I don't know, but I'm going to be in Texas, so I might come see you guys. I'll be in Texas.
Hey.
I'm a guest speaker at Texas A&M week after the fight. So maybe down there, maybe I'll come see you guys while I'm down in Texas.
That would be really nice. And then we can get hopefully more than a middle-of-the-road answer on retirement and whether you're fighting Jones, and we can pry it out of you. All right, I know you got 1%. So, Daniel, let me give them your Twitter is DC_MMA. Again, that's UFC.
It's a horrible handle, and it's the same horrible handle for every social media platform, Instagram, Facebook. It's so I get it.
And we've been through this. It's not really a nickname. It's just an initial.
It's really not. It's just my initials, but, I'm not the most creative guy.
That's okay. It's better than getting nicknamed with something you hate, which often happens in this sport.
Hey, that's why you pick your own nickname. But I got to tell you something, though. You're looking pumped up since the last time I saw you. How many push-ups are you doing daily?
None.
How many push-ups are you doing?
This is just fat. See, I'm thinking of competing as a woman in the IPF Transcendent Powerlifting Federation. All right, Mr. Cormier, I know you're busy. 1%. Say hi to Mr. Cook. I'll give him a ring. We must go. Thank you, sir.
Please.
Godspeed on the fight.
Thank y'all for having me again. It's always fun.
Hey there, here I am drinking from my mug in a button down. How often do you see this? Never. So do me a favor and yourself, click one of these videos playing one of these boxes here, or subscribe, hit the notification bell also, because subscriptions don't really mean a whole lot. If you really want to support the show, join my club. If you don't, then there's no helping you.